Welcome, Red Ice members. Thank you for tuning in. Glad to have you here. We are talking to David Hatcher Childress, and we are going to change gear in this second segment and dive into the areas of Easter Island, megalithic structures, and lost cities from around the world. And on the topic of Easter Island, I know that David is the kind of guy who travels around the world to actually be on location a lot of the places that he writes about. So I guess I could ask you right away here, David. Easter Island, have you been there yourself?
Yes, several times. Easter Island is one of the most remote islands in the world. Hawaii actually is also very remote island chain out in the middle of the Pacific, and the Pacific Ocean is 1/3 of the surface of the Earth. Easter Island is really an unusual place, and of course you have the giant statues there. It's probably one of the most mysterious places, mile for mile, kilometer per kilometer of just weird stuff packed on a little island out in the South Pacific. It's even, it gets a lot of winds from Antarctica coming there. It does remain barely sort of quasi-tropical climate there. On Easter Island, I mean, the natives themselves say, and even they have it in the tourist brochures that are made for the island, that they believe that Easter Island was part of a larger continent, a place they called Hiva, 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 and that this larger continent that Easter Island was part of sank in a cataclysm. There was some destructive natural occurrence that just sent this lost land of Hiva, kind of like the lost continent of Mu or Lemuria or something.
Right.
Sent it under the ocean, and that the last bit of that land that remained above water was Easter Island. And they say, I mean, these are their own legends on the island, that some of the statues were placed around the island, completely at different parts of the island, and they face inland. They're on the shore of the island, They're facing inland, and they had inlaid eyes. The statues originally had a red hat, a top knot, so that you have the big statue itself, and they don't actually have legs. They start from about the waist, but many of them are 40, 50 feet high.
Wow.
But they had also eyes inlaid in the statues, and a power came out of the eyes, which they call mana. And mana is, in fact, like a Sanskrit word. And we were talking in the early hour about ancient Hindus, Buddhists, Tantric, Himalayans, and Tibetans actually crossing the Pacific Ocean. There's certain evidence that Easter Island is part of all that. But this power came out of the eyes of the statues, and it protected the island and kept it from sinking like the rest of the land of Hiva. So you have a lot of really, really strange legends that are associated with Easter Island.
Fascinating. And you said they were from, how big did you say they were? About?
Well, many of they're different size statues. Some are maybe 10 feet to 20 feet high. Others are much, much taller. The largest of the statues are still in the quarries. They were hewn out, but they were never completely removed from the quarries. These things are as tall as a 3 or 4 story building in fact.
Oh, my God. Sheesh, that's
I mean, that's kind of the question about a lot of the Easter Island statues is that they're huge. I mean, they're really, really big.
Yeah.
And the idea is that they would apparently quarry them, then move them around the island. And their own legends there are that the statues walked. The statues moved themselves. And it's like some levitation story or something where
right.
they were able to, I mean, this is what they're saying, that they were able to give life to these statues, and the statues were alive. They would put these eyes in them, and the statues could move. And the statues supposedly drifted in a clockwise manner around the island. And I talk about all this in my book on lost cities of ancient Lemuria in the Pacific, where I have 2 chapters actually on Easter Island. But that's something else you find throughout Polynesia. And if you go to Tahiti and the Marquesas Islands, where you also have some pretty large statues, not as big as the ones on Easter Island, though, but the legends that are associated with those statues too is that they're alive, and there's and Polynesians even still believe this today, that these aren't just rocks carved to look like, you know, some person, some ancient king or whatever. These things are alive. They've even, I talk about this too in my book on Lost Cities of Ancient Lemuria in the Pacific. There's in the Gauguin Museum in Tahiti, people there actually believe that one of the statues murdered a little girl there, and that's a strange story.
Yeah.
On Easter Island, one of the things they did, I mean, this is pretty important. They had a revolution on Easter Island where the long ears and the short ears had a battle, and there were, even on this small island, there were 2 groups of people, one with very long, stretched out earlobes, and ones with shorter earlobes. And the ones with the long earlobes, the long ears, they were the aristocracy, they were the rulers. But then there was a revolution on the island, and they attempted to kill these long-eared people, take over the island. And one of the things they did after that was they went around and basically killed the statues, because they believed the statues were all alive. So when the first Europeans got to Easter Island, except in the crater of Rano Raraku, where you have hundreds of statues buried up to their chests inside the crater, and they're standing up, and they haven't fallen down, but the statues that were placed all around the edge of the island, these statues were alive. They had this power coming out of their eyes. What the short-eared people did during the revolution was they wanted to kill these statues, so they would get a big rock, and there's a lot of rocks on Easter Island, and they would put it in such a place just behind the statue so that they would then push the statue over, and the statue was falling, and as it fell, its neck would hit this big rock and break, and they were trying to basically kill the statues, break their necks by pushing them over, and they wanted the statues to basically have a broken neck, and that would kill the statues, because they were alive, they believe, the people. So today, when you go to Easter Island, and you see the various statues that are there, they've all been re-erected by modern archaeologists for tourists. They've put them back together, cemented the heads back onto the neck if they were broken. Not all of them totally were broken. They pushed them over. They weren't always able to break their necks in every case. But those statues have all been re-erected by modern archaeologists, including a couple of weeks ago, this crazy Finnish guy went to Easter Island, and he broke one of the ears off
Really?
of one of the statues. Yeah.
Okay.
this was big news here in the United States at the time, probably, and certainly in Easter Island and Chile, and
yeah, of course,
probably in Finland too.
Yeah, obviously.
And that guy was arrested. I mean, a woman saw him do this. I mean, it's kind of a crazy thing, but yeah, he climbed up on one of the statues, and he must have taken a big rock in his hand, and he bashed out part of the lower ear of one of the statues. But that statue too had been re-erected by archaeologists. In fact, that statue that he attacked was re-erected by none other than the great Norwegian archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl.
Right, yeah, exactly. So I mean, if we look at the overall design of the faces, I mean, we're all very familiar, I guess, with the look of the Easter Island statues. Is there any finding that you've done, David, of anything similar in the world?
There are statues that are similar to Easter Island statues, but not many. And Easter Island statues are they're pretty unique. You do see some like them. It's supposedly on Pitcairn Island, which is the famous mutiny on the Bounty Island, and that is actually the nearest island to Easter Island in Polynesia, anyway. That island, too, had allegedly some statues like Easter Island statues on it. They were also pushed off cliffs and things like that. That island is basically has cliffs all around it. It's a very difficult island to get onto. It doesn't really have any good beaches or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the statues were around it. If you go to Tiwanaku as well, in Bolivia, high up in the Andes Mountains of South America, there's some statues there. A few, and they did look like some Easter Island statues. There's a curious type of statue, and one of them is on Easter Island. And I mention this also in my book on the mystery of the Olmecs. I have a whole chapter on this. There is a very curious form of tribute, which is known as Quizuo, Quizuo. And it is where a person, and a number of statues are like this, a person is on his knees with oftentimes his hands are on his thighs and his head is bent forward. But it's a very unusual position to be in, and you're on your knees, squatting essentially. Your hands are on your thighs, and your head is put forward in a kind of a subjugation. It's a kind of a position you might take if you were to walk and have an audience with the emperor or the big chief or something, where it's a position of submission to someone in authority. But that position, this Quizuo position, is found all over the world. One of the statues on Easter Island is in this position, and it's a unique statue. No other statues in Easter Island are like this. A person on his knees with his hands on his thighs, his head bent forward, and Thor Heyerdahl was the one who excavated that statue too. Because many of these statues around the crater in the middle of the island are buried under many meters of just soil and volcanic ash and stuff. You would think it would have taken many hundreds, even thousands of years to become so buried over time like these statues are. But if you go to Tiwanaku, if you go to the Olmec areas in Mexico, also you will see this same position of statues in Mohenjo-Daro, in India and Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
It's an unusual way. Egyptians also are in this position. So there you have what is a really curious position, but you find it all over the world. Here's another